Diego, California, and I'm pleased to introduce to you, I'll be presenting literacy, that I can't pronounce, a very possible, necessary tool for inclusion and integration.
Thank you. Welcome, all of you. Thank you for being here. Sort of fly-by-night, informal as heck. If you have a really super pertinent question you want to ask immediately about exactly what we're doing, holler. If not, you can wait until the end where we'll have some minutes for doing this. I'm Tom Gilbert. I work at Northeast Care Center in North Royalton. It's convenient that you guys are here in my backyard. This is great. I've been in this field for the better part of 48 years, and for the last 26 have been doing this literacy adventure, and we'll explain all of that as we go.
Hi, I'm Monica Logan-Pushin, and we've been working together on Tom's efforts with individuals with intellectual disabilities since about 1997 or so. So we're here to tell you about our story and our adventure, and hopefully inspire you to take on some literacy practices with people.
Oh, yeah, Neil, the guest of honor.
All right.
Right here.
See if we can squeeze in traffic, everybody.
How are you doing, sir? There are other people who are invited. They're probably having great difficulty with the parking situation in downtown Cleveland, and they might show up at any second. We shall find out. Okay. Oh, please take time to look at and examine all of the teaching materials out in the hallway. Hey, Jim.
Hey.
And we brought you today, and you can do that while we're speaking if you want, or afterwards. Oh, wait a minute.
You could just go back upwards. Here we are.
Okay.
This is us.
Okay, that's it. CMS in Washington, D.C., Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, are currently mandating and demanding that we have full access and integration, which includes literacy. It may be the most important linchpin that is available as an intervention that we have at our disposals. Can I hit the next one? Learner objectives here. You can read these as you go. All of you here would not have your current jobs if you were not able to read. And one-on-one literacy tutoring works. If you can read, you can be a tutor. It's that simple. We use emergent literacy materials that are outlined here. The process is what's important. We have an entire curriculum available. I have flash drives over there if you guys have your laptops. You can download the stuff now. You can get in touch with me. I can forward the stuff through email. I will make sure that it's all in your hands. And I'm giving it to you freely. The process is basically the same for everybody in terms of the developmental progression that they go through. Basic sight words are gotten first. Phonemic awareness comes second. Simple one-syllable nouns, verbs, articles, prepositions, then leading to compound words, syllabification, independent reading. The process is just absolutely simple. And there's no ceiling. Once you start the train rolling, go ahead and try to stop it. You can't. Next slide. Okay. If individuals can communicate verbally in a give and take two-way conversation, they can learn how to read. It's basically that simple. It's basically above the Piagetian group monologue or parallel play behavior, which is a mental age of about 3 to 3.5. If you know people in your population who are completely verbal but don't know how to read, the ball's in your hands. You can actually do the process that works. Take my card, keep in touch. I'm a permanent resource, seriously. Everything I have, I'm giving away. And this process is extremely interactive. Next page. So we are to the next page. This process is extremely interactive, as we hope to demonstrate later. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to get on the mic because sometimes my voice isn't that loud. I think what we really are trying to say to you is that people with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, may have some emergent or basic literacy behaviors that have not been recognized. So what we're asking people to do is to learn how to recognize those behaviors. So we're going to be showing you what it might be possible for some individuals to be able to do and how then they can learn more to do. And it's just simply that we haven't seen that they probably already know a certain amount of this kind of information and skills. So it's almost like discovering hidden skills, okay? Or for those people who really don't have these abilities developed yet, we're starting at the very basics, the way young children might develop certain kinds of behaviors. Again, on the premise that it might be that these people were never given the chance to try to learn these things earlier in their lives, earlier from their youth up until just yesterday, okay? So if you have a young child in your world, or you've ever known a young child, and you ride around in the car with the child, what does the child do? 3 years, 4 years old. Point out the window and they point to signs. They say stop, they say Dunkin' Donuts, they say Taco Bell, they say all these different things because they're basically at a whole word level. So we're kind of under the presumption that the individuals who Tom has worked with and who we're trying to encourage you to work with would be at kind of that whole word level. So if you're riding along in the car and the kid says Taco Bell and you go Taco Bell, they're reading along with you, okay? They're sharing reading, as we're basically saying. At this young age, kids are pretty much very much interested in whole word configurations. That's our premise, that we're starting with whole words. So initially, what we're asking individuals to do with their tutor is to examine easy to read materials, much of which is on display here, and to kind of go through it in a word by word joint reading kind of fashion. And if you say, but I'm reading to him or I'm reading to her, well, yeah, you are, but they're sharing it with you to the extent that they can, slowly but surely, okay? As we're gonna go into as we go further through the presentation, it's likened to a conversation where I say a little something and you say a little something. And it's not like there's a leader and a follower in a conversation, and there's not a leader and a follower in this reading process. People are just basically doing something together with one person with more skills, providing more than the individual with the lesser skills. So it's kind of this joint experience. So what we're doing is advocating that as the learner gradually recognizes more and more words, the person who's the tutor says less. So if we're reading 5 words together, initially I may be saying 5, then I may be saying 4, then I might be saying only one of those words. And we're kind of looking at this kind of gradual release of independence model, okay? And just one more quick comment. The idea is the process is minimally directive. It's directive in the sense that you're starting to acquaint the individual, then you're releasing any kind of direction once they get it. And as Tom was talking about things like recognizing letters and syllabicating words, that's a long way down the pike. Where we're starting at this point is just letting a person recognize words and read along with the words that they know. So that's the starting point. So if you think about individuals that you know, it's possible that they have some of these skills and they're pointing out things in the environment to you. The mail may arrive and they may look at the mail and hand the letters to the people that should be receiving those letters. They're kind of recognizing whole words. Be on the lookout for behaviors like that to see if people are even just taking products out of a cabinet and recognizing the labels, okay? Being able to go into a wallet and take out denominations of money or take out a MasterCard versus a Visa. Things like that where you just know that they're looking at whole configurations of print. Okay, in the interest of time, we'll go on to what Tom's gonna say now.
Literacy is like 100% language-based. We don't speak in letters or broken syllables, we speak in whole words, therefore we read in whole words, what Monica was saying. Next slide. It's really based on turn-taking principles, with the student following the encouragement and lead of the tutor. Oh, that's you.
Is there anything you want to say, or should I go? I'll
No,
go
go
back
ahead.
in. Okay. So Tom was talking about Piaget and some of the developmental kind of things. So I'm just going to give you a quick professor walkthrough at real light, super light. Okay? When you have little kids playing together, they play in a fashion that is generally called parallel. So if you've walked into a room of little children, you see islands of little people doing their own thing. Okay? They're in the same environment, but they're not necessarily interacting. Okay? We're supposing that for a lot of people who are adults who have some literacy abilities, those are as hidden inside them as the behaviors that the children are exhibiting in the room when they're not interacting with somebody else. You have to have somebody engaged with you to figure out what they know, okay? So that's the first premise. We gotta get them with us in something that's literacy based. Basically word recognition, for lack of something else right now. Second thing that we demand of these individuals is a little bit of attention shifting. So we're saying we're going to be reading with you, and we're going to be doing this conversationally and talking about what we're reading, so you've got to be able to shift your attention between two things. If some of the individuals you're working with are struggling with that, again, this is where we're at, this is what we're working on. I should tell you I'm a speech-language pathologist. This is where I come into this. This is my therapy objective, to attention shift between two particular different purposes. Obviously, the visual skill matters. An individual has to be able to regard the print, but we can have print of any size. In fact, Tom puts things in very large print even on the wall. So the idea would be that you do have to have some visual skills, some tracking, some processing, some visual memory, okay? Language skills, well, we're doing a little bit of repeating. I'm reading a sentence and you're reading it back after me in this approach to teaching. So you've got to really have some sentence repetition ability. But again, if you're looking at the words and reading or remembering any of them, you're getting a little bit of cue for that recall. As we've said, engage in conversation. When we talk about the story, you've got to have some discourse skills. You've got to be able to talk about what the storyline is and have some memory for the beginning of the story as we pursue through the story. So we choose text of length and complexity that is not going to be too hard for this individual. You're going to see a lot of materials here where the story is no more than 3 or 4 lines long, because that's the discourse length they're comfortable with. So you know the people you're working with. How much do they talk to you about a topic? Do you exchange 3 sentences with one another and then the topic is done? That's what you're going to be reading. You're not going to be reading a longer book. But if they talk to you at length about something that happened over the weekend, for example, then you might be able to use a story that's got many more lines than that, perhaps even a page or 2 long. So basically, we also have another theoretical principle that I call the ability to determine the parts of the whole. So when you're reading, you're looking at words on a page. That's a part of a whole. Each word is a part of that page. If you get to the point where you're breaking down words into letters, that's a part of a whole. You've got the letters and the words. If you're thinking about a story, it's got a beginning, middle, and end. That's a part of a whole. So we also are thinking that these individuals come to us, and it's almost like attention shifting. You're shifting from a part to a whole, from a part to a whole. So those are kind of our prerequisites. That's kind of our developmental understanding for the individual. But as you know, the jobs that we're involved in, we take people from a place where they're just barely doing it to a place where they can do this kind of thing. So we're looking for just the very surface of these behaviors to begin with, okay? And that's why we say patience and persistence, and plan for years, not weeks or months, just like everything else that we're working on in this population. Okay, well, there we go. And this one's yours.
Which page am I on here?
If you wanted to do more of the Piaget
Oh, no,
thing.
okay.
Okay.
Yes, the single most important prerequisite for learning how to read is basically being able to carry out a 2-way give and take conversation. What is fascinating about this is that working in this field, I have known many individuals who appear on the surface to be carrying on a conversation with you, and then you realize after a few minutes that they're almost echolalic. They're talking their own monologue, and they haven't heard a word that you've said. The fascinating thing about a 2-way conversation is that you're actually juggling 3 different things simultaneously. Your own words, your opponent's words, and then the resultant connection between the two to have a third conversation that is the result of both of you working together. And if you are reading a book, you are actually carrying on a conversation with the author of that book. Yes, you are the listener, because the author, through the words of the book, is actually doing the speaking. But you are paying attention to all the details of what you are reading. And you're also bringing your prior knowledge, your entire life experience, to that reading event, such that you could ask 50 different people in a room to read a passage and then interpret it. You're going to get 50 different interpretations because people relate to what they read thinking, oh, I remember this from my childhood. Well, everybody has different childhoods. So it's really important to realize that once you get to the point where you can actually have a give and take conversation with somebody else, that is what you're looking at as your baseline for really beginning the process. And you're going to discover all the hidden things that Monica mentioned, things that you didn't even know about that they possessed while they were beginning the reading process.
Okay. Just one more thing on this. We're looking at the idea of regularly scheduled reading activities. So what we're doing is kind of creating a life of homework. I hate to say it that way, but you have to think about where in the day the individual is going to be focused on literacy, okay? I don't know if any of you have ever engaged in any kind of a self-study sort of thing at home, or even people who take a period of time through the day to do something like read religious material and to really study that. It has to change the focus on your life a little bit. You have to sort of regard the home environment as a place where learning can take place. So I know for some people that's, well, this is our home, this is our recreational time. But there's a commitment. It's like any other kind of self-improvement process. If you decided that you were going to read the entirety of War and Peace, for example, you'd have to set aside time. Or if you decided you were going to deepen your religious study, you have to set aside time. So we're looking for sort of like this special time during the day where individuals, whatever they're doing, if there's sort of a parallel play, for example, being on your own, making your own time, structuring your own time, let that go. Come over to join this group. Have this kind of group interaction about what's going on with their reading materials. As we go along, we're going to be kind of throwing out a lot of different ideas to use, okay? So we have to think about, for example, people might be interested in a sports report. They might be interested in something that is like, I hate to say it, celebrity news and gossip. People make fun of me for reading this stuff, but you know you read it, right? Shopping information, reading the circulars that arrive in the mail, reading online. Websites about favorite TV shows, the kind of fan sort of thing. Simple poetry and song lyrics, all the things that people might join in and look at together for a period of time. So it's study, but we don't want to make it seem like dry and boring and schoolwork. It's basically the idea of concentration, and that literacy has to be shared. Because we've already seen with these people, we can't just say, well, here's your environment, go be literate in it, pick up like other people do on the words. It's not going to work. We have to sit with them and really concentrate on this. It might help with games, and there are a lot of different kind of games out there, or sort of quasi-worksheet games, things that have to do with matching, identifying items within an array, what goes, what doesn't go in that group. So the idea would be that I know that these folks live in the same home and they have a very casual relationship, but during this time, there's more of a structure. You might have a specific way of doing the game where you call on somebody or you delegate somebody to do something. This is your role in the game, this is my role in the game. So the idea would be that you feel comfortable with setting up this kind of reciprocity and conversation, but it's got a little bit of structure around it. Okay, and again, very quickly, we're making the idea of interest-based and strengths-based print. So think about the idea of creating memory books, scrapbooks. Those are all low-tech and three-dimensional. It could be Pinterest, it could be Instagram, it could be any of those kinds of things. It could be scanned-in materials, and it's all electronic. I realize a lot of people don't use any print at all anymore. I realize a lot of people are only using print or a mixture thereof. So the idea would be that you have this whole idea of speech to print. If we lived it and we talked about it, we now put it in print. We sort of memorialize it, okay? We keep our ticket stubs, we keep our lists, we keep our schedules, and we keep our reminders, and it becomes the print experiences of our lives, okay? Maybe ramp it up a little bit with more greeting cards. Our keynote speaker talked about the beauty of a greeting card. Get back to some of those things, but certainly, of course, all the electronic materials. Because what do we read? We read these things in our daily lives, but then we discard them because we're not trying to learn from them. We have to dial down. This is what you're trying to learn from. This is what you need to keep and use on a daily basis. Okay.
Please make available all the stuff in the table out there. One of the things I did bring was autobiographies for individuals who are pre-literate and beginning the process right at the Piagetian level of group monologue or parallel play behavior. I got in touch with guardians and friends and I said, I need all of the pictures from their entire life. I will assuredly return them and put information on the back, who's in the pictures and so on. And I put together these autobiographies, I have 3 of them out here, but I did maybe half the people in the house. And just going from birth all the way through, where they lived, what street, what teachers they had, all in pictures. And then I would put in beside the pictures, all of the biographical information that would go with the pictures. And this was a preliminary thing that was relating to each of these individuals and got them used to sitting down with me, and we're going to read from the beginning, and this is what I looked like when I was born, this is me in my toddler stage, and so on, and all my aunts and uncles and cousins. That's a really great introduction to how literacy works for people right at the beginning.
We have a quick buzzword on here, the idea of the echo and impress. Have you caught on? Basically, that's what we're doing. The individuals are echoing what's going on, and it's being impressed upon them, and it's also being echoed and impressed in print. It's speech to print. It's auditory to visual.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if I happen to say what's first and then they repeat it, that's fine. If they say it, then I will repeat what they said to confirm what they said and what they saw. So it's really interactive. Oh, by the way, make sure your students, if you are going to be doing this, get glasses if they need them. And find the optometrists and the ophthalmologists that need to be pushed to get glasses. A short story with Christine, this lovely lady up here that I began with in 1991. Her parents and sisters assured me that she didn't need glasses because they'd taken her to all the best people in Cleveland. And my working with her, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, it was obvious to me that she needed glasses. And I suggested an Andreas Marcotti from Cleveland Clinic who specializes with our folks. And she went and got a second opinion. Chris can't see as well as I can. And I'm blind without these. So I've experienced this with so many of my students who needed glasses, and the medical community just going, they don't need glasses, why even bother to test? If you're going to be doing this literacy stuff and they need glasses, be the advocate to push for glasses and actually demand scripts when you go along on the appointment.
Since this is one of the latest crusades, you know now that refraction exams are passive. You simply look in the machine and it measures what your glasses should. If you've had your eyes done recently. So there's no excuse that they don't have the behavior to participate in the eye exam.
Touchdown. I recommend one-on-one tutoring for 1 hour a week if possible. If it's 5 minutes, great. If it's 15, half an hour, more than an hour, that's getting tiring. Same time and same place. It really is cooperative learning. Reading together, allowing the student to out loud guess the words while pointing at them. The more advanced to the corrects as necessary. It is very, very simple. Oh yes. When I began this process in 1991, I got permission from Laubach Literacy at International Syracuse, New York, to retype all of their materials in size 28 Arial font. Just as a note, in all the research that I did, I came across this marvelous little section in Dr. Marilyn Jager Adams' book, Beginning to Read, which is a Bible. If you want to learn about this process, I have the copies here if you want to look at it. Charles A. Perfetti from the University of Pittsburgh determined that most of the problems that individuals have in the general community, as well as our field, are with orthographic visual recognition of letters and words. Okay, if most of the problems are based on that, then take all of the print and adapt it to size 28 Arial font. Get rid of the pictures, unless you need the pictures. You don't have to use the materials that we have. Oh yeah, this is part of one of the books that I have. It's really simple. Repetitious, easy to see, and there's also a website called Dreams Time, DREAMSTIME, Dreams Time.
Mail.
Yes, you can get online and find Dreams Time, and they have 50 million pictures available that are free or virtually free. And so I just borrowed all the pictures, and if you don't like the pictures, you can substitute whatever you like. All of these curriculum materials are available for you, and you can just play around with them. But if you don't like what I have, you can make your own. You can go on the internet and find anything on there and steal it, copy it, paste it onto your own Word system files, and then change the font to size 28 Arial, and then you've got your reading materials. It's that easy. Oh, by the way, I created my own curriculum because I wanted to share this process with anybody and everybody. And unfortunately, Laubach and HarperCollins and all the people that I got written permission for me to use, I can't share it because then I'm breaking copyright law. And copyright law breaking is like worse than anything. Jail for, it's like that scene in The Firm where Tom Cruise says, 10 years in jail, $10,000 fine for everything laughing. So anyway, yeah, this is one of mine. Next slide. Yes. The words being read are all words that they've spoken and heard. Learning to read is actually like a misnomer because you're going to discover that the people that you're teaching have really marvelous vocabularies, and they've actually heard more than they can actually express. And so matching up the visual symbols on the pages with the words that they've spoken and heard is really a matching skill. So it's repetition, repetition, repetition. And as you just progress through the process, they're going to begin picking up these individual words and then storing them as permanently in their memory bank. Phonemic awareness is learned. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but one of the things I discovered with this process is that out of all the individuals that I worked with, more than 50 in the last 26 years, long term, not just short term, but long term.
Wow.
They learned at different speeds, absolutely, different speeds of acquiring the language, but they all followed the exact same developmental progression. And it was whole words at first. We only have 26 letters in the alphabet. The Oxford English Dictionary unabridged has like 680,000 words in it. I'm still learning how to read. I got 3 college degrees. I'll die still learning how to read. Everybody in this room is still learning how to read. I've got examples of words that I've stolen out of the dictionary that are words that I've never seen before. I don't even know. I've never heard of them before. So that's the process. Where was I? God, don't get old. It's not worth it. But with the repetition of very, very simple, repetitive words, the reader will discover by themselves that words like boy, big, bad, bed, bat all have that same B signature at the beginning and all have that same sound. And they begin to make the connections. Wow. And you're going to recognize their ability with phonemic awareness when they see a word like big and say the word boy. Whenever that happens, touchdown, I stop the proceedings and I say, you've just demonstrated phonemic awareness because you recognize that first letter and that its sound. Even though you made a mistake, you've shown me that you know what the letter sound correspondence is. And then car, cat, can, cab, call, care. The same thing happens with all of the initial letter sounds of all the words. And then eventually that phonemic awareness takes off and they go, oh, I see that in the middle of the word or at the end of the word. And it's all through their experience. It's something that is not taught, it is learned through reading, reading, reading.
So why is this such a big deal? Because they're examining a part of a whole, quite simply. we're initially looking at just impressing these whole words and just recognizing and repeating whole words. And when the individual starts to break down the words and be able to say, there's a B sound, or I'm just going to say the wrong word, like house for home, because I'm seeing H and we're talking about a house or where we live, then we're getting to see that they're actually getting some recognition of phonemic awareness. And so to define phonemic awareness is basically the idea that language is made of sounds. And to define phonics, it's basically the sounds that we say can be paired with letters and regarded in print. We can visually regard the sounds we say. Probably some of your kids have had report cards with phonemic awareness scores, or you had phonemic awareness homework, or the teachers mentioned it during a parent-teacher conference. And certainly phonics, if not when you're in school yourself. So the idea is that we can't start with this because our individuals are not going to work building up part to whole. These individuals are basically looking at wholes, the way little kids do when they're driving around and saying, ah, Dunkin' Donuts, and then later starting to say, oh, there's a part of a whole, it's a B sound, and I'm going to use that in a lot of different ways as I read other words. So it's a different kind of a process, but it is completely theoretical. And to justify, you have to let me brag for 2 seconds, okay? The article that we published about Christine was in 2002. The journal in those days was called Mental Retardation. It's now called Journal of Developmental Disabilities, I think. So the idea would be that it got very good exposure. And if you go on Google Scholar now and you put in Pershing, because my husband's family name, there's only just a few people in the world, it's the easiest way to find it. You can find the Google Scholar citations for the article, and we have them listed as of a couple of weeks ago in the back here, and I'm going to brag to you, we have numerous citations from around the world, New Zealand, Australia. People are looking at this kind of work and saying, you know what, there are other cases of individuals. Some of the articles are more specific to populations, for example, Down syndrome, whatever it might be, but people are saying, you know what, we do things like you do. Okay, there are other people who are on this wavelength. So we're very, very happy with that kind of scholarship for this. So the article was about Christine, who again has joined us today. Did you want to go ahead, Tom, and talk about the background?
When I started this process in 1991, and the gentleman of the hour in the wheelchair over here, Mr. Neil Burke from Alpha 2 Northeast Care Center, now lives at Parham House over on 130th. He and his 3 brothers, two other brothers, lived at Alpha 2. I first met Neil in 1975, that's 42 years ago, at Apple Creek State Institute, and we've been friends ever since. Neil, God bless him, at his annual ISP in March of 1991, stated that the only thing he wanted to do was to learn how to read. And coincidentally, miraculously, there happened to be Medicaid federal surveyors at our facility for their week, their annual review during that week. And one of them was sitting in on the meeting. And she turned to me and said, oh, you're the QMRP. Neil wants to learn how to read. That's your job, you're gonna do it. And she said, oh, by the way, I'll be back for my look behind survey in 6 weeks to make sure that it's happened. So I went, oh, okay. So I got on the phone and I began calling around. 1991, computers were just beginning and so on. And Neil was demanding that he wanted to learn how to read. I called everybody in the world and I got 0. And finally, a friend of mine at work said, well, why don't you try Project Learn in downtown Cleveland, because they get adults who are have fallen through the cracks. You can get them to help out with this. So I called him up and I explained that I had this individual who was 35 years old. He'd never been to school and he wanted to learn how to read. And he went, oh yeah, bring him down. I said, oh, by the way, he's listed as mentally retarded. And they screamed at me and they went, no, we don't do that. As a matter of fact, they still don't. Project Learn doesn't. Anyway, so I said, well, wait a minute. I'll come down and I'll do the 2 Saturday afternoon courses to become a tutor and a specialist in your literacy program, and I'll just bring the materials back to the group home and I'll teach them here. And they went, oh yeah, you can do that. So I did it. I was cleared. I was in the master's program in special ed, multi-handicapped at the time, and I knew that this was absolutely a dead issue. There was never any mention of literacy training, full literacy training to individuals in this population. It was over. So I'd done my work, I brought stuff back to the house, and I began to work with Neil. And he began to learn. And I went, wait a minute. So I went down to the library at CSU and I got a librarian to share with me what was available on the 4th floor, which is the huge millions of journal articles. And she helped me plug into the computer that we have mental retardation as a keyword, and there were 125,000 articles on mental retardation. And she said, okay, set it aside, then we're going to do literacy. And we did literacy, and there was another 125,000 articles on literacy. She said, okay, we're going to combine them. And she did. 6 articles, 1991, 6. And they were all 6 of them were on functional literacy, which is survival terms. Enter, exit for buildings, men and women for bathrooms, danger, poison, coke, maybe. 20 words at maximum. And here I am working with Neil, and he's learning. And that started this odyssey. So Neil, you did it. Woo! And it started the snowball. And of course, I was working with Neil, and everybody else in the group home went, hey, you're teaching him how to read. Me too. I had 10 students in 6 months. And then people from Brooklyn Adult Training Center got in touch with me, and I connected with Christine, and it snowballed. So there you have it. Anyway, Chris has been remarkable. Starting at the very beginning of very simple Laubach books. We've read The Secret Garden, we've read Charlotte's Web, we've read illustrated classics, a lot of adapted things. And let me share with you 2 stories about Chris. In 1995, Chris and I and my wife went to Columbus on an all-day excursion with Chris. And we had a blast for the entire day. And on the way home from Columbus, 2.5 hours driving, Chris was in the back seat with her cell phone, calling 15, 20 different people, explaining to them what a marvelous time she'd had during the day. She wouldn't have been able to do that prior to the literacy intervention. The literacy intervention for her, and it's not me, she's taught herself. By the way, if you're going to be teaching literacy to your folks, they're going to be teaching themselves, you're going to be helping and facilitating. But the actual teaching is done by them. They're acquiring it, they're self-empowered with it. Last Friday, today's Wednesday? Yes. Last Friday I'm at home, it's about 8:30 at night. Chris calls me with her cell phone, and she says, Tom, can you help me? I said, sure. She says, can you spell convention? So I over the phone, we went through it, and when I said the word N, she said, is that M as in mom? And I went, no, that's N as in nice. She goes, oh, thanks. Then we got to the second time, and then again I repeated, and she went through the whole thing again. And I asked her, what are you doing? She said, I'm writing a note to my day program people that I'm not going to be there on Wednesday. I'm going to be here, and I just want to let them know where I would be. When I hung up the phone, I started to cry. Because I'm not an independent human being. We're trying to push independence on everybody. I'm not. I'm disabled. See this? I can't see without them. Did I build my own house? No. Did I do I grow my own food? No. Did I build my own car? No. I know how to get access in the world, anywhere and everywhere, because I've been taught how to be an interactive and interdependent human being. The difference between Chris and me after that phone call Friday? 0. She called me up because she knew where to access the information to help her do what she needed to do to be interactive and adult and totally conversant with adult life. Does anybody here need further justification for the role of literacy? No. It's amazing. Absolutely incredible. Go ahead.
Okay. So very, very shortly, the individuals who joined us today are going to read. But we just want to make sure we kind of impress a couple of other things upon you, because you're going to be going back and people are going to be asking you for justification. So we provided a long reference list at the end of this document, but these are kind of the highlights. If you were going to kind of go back and do the elevator speech at your facility, the idea would be, no, you don't need phonics first. You're going to start to be reading by looking at whole words and having this conversational interchange about words. Ideally, words that have meant something to you, that have come from your life, like your scrapbook, okay? Or the other things that you're interested in, your sports teams. Yes, we're going to be working with people to provide that kind of intellectual knowledge, metacognitive skills, being able to predict how things go. When you're reading a story, you're always kind of predicting towards the end. A little bit of prediction, a little bit of attention shifting, a little bit of self-regulation of learning strategies like, do I need to go back and reread that again? Or do we need to talk about this more so I can understand it? Or should we stop here for today so I can really think this through? Those kinds of things. It's an echo and an impress method. And the final one with Smith is the idea that reading is always a parallel examination of the stimulus and memory. So you want the person to look at what's on the print, but really what they're doing is thinking about what they know. Every time you sit down to read something, you're thinking about what you already know. That's why we use familiar materials and we go over things over and over and over again. So you're not going to be setting up something like a new page every day or a new word every day. Those kind of progress measures don't work. It's sort of like more delving into it, spending more time, talking more deeply about the information. I might have read you 4 words out of the sentence. Next week, month, whatever, I'll be reading you 3 or 2 of those words. It's a very kind of slow process. And the other thing is that we're justifying the individual's access to print by saying, you know, print lets us do a lot of things in this world. It lets us be what's called a text participant. So I'm reading this just because it matters to me. It's funny, it's personal, it's useful, it's my friend's Instagram. I'm reading this because I want to. I want to participate in this information. The other is sort of taking a step back and being a text user. Well, what's going to be the purpose of this individual reading? Well, maybe they'll learn to follow some instructions, for example, like bake a cake, or do some other sorts of things that they find of interest. Fill out a deposit form at a bank. Who knows what it's going to be? But that's not the only thing. It's not just this functional text user perspective. There are these other things as well. The individual, as part of a participant, might say, you know, I can really analyze this information. It reminds me of something I already know, or I learned that. They sort of get a little more intellectual about it rather than just the enjoyment stage. And finally, of course, the idea of the code breaking. Recognizing a logo, MasterCard, Visa, Pepsi, Coke. Recognizing a whole word, and as we're saying, then the letters and symbols like punctuation, etc. So there are all these different things going on that have to do with being immersed in the print. So Tom's process, I think he's kind of explained it, but if you want to just kind of do one more quick review of it, and then our readers are going to read it any minute now. Or do we want to just let them kind of refer back to this, because it's a time we were going to break for reading.
Yeah, let's break for reading.
Okay.
This is online for anybody to
It's all
have to
online, it's
review.
all on the app.
Yeah.
Connie put it up on the app. So you kind of get, these are sort of just the instructional steps.
Oh.
This is a nice note
Oh.
from Christine a long time ago.
Yeah, I gotta share this. I didn't see this one little aspect of this for 20 years. This is a 20-year note. When Chris began doing notes, it was just basic symbols and so on, and she actually got to the point where she was asking me to help her with the notes, and then as the writing increased, she got to the point where she was doing the notes on her own. And this is totally independent. 20 years later, I recognized that she'd just simply done her own invented spelling. My name is Thomas Gilbert, and I just thought that was a G. Tom S. Gilbert. You know, not Thomas, but she didn't know that, but she knew that my name was Thomas, so she spelled it out, Thomas. It's fantastic, I love it.
So if you've watched your children learn, it's really recapping that natural process, but a little bit different because of the older individuals that we're working with. So this is the time we set aside for actual reading by some of the clients of Tom's. And
Oh, can you get to that so you can see what we're doing? Oh, no, here. Oh yeah, you need your glasses.
Yeah.
No kidding.
So I think the plan is that the readers have not examined these materials before. Is that the idea?
Right.
And you're seeing them projected now, but you see their back is to the projector. So they're going to be looking at it in printed format in the notebook. And so you're going to be saying what is either shared or independent reading, depending on what they need to do now.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
A
Morning.
moi day F do
Mm-hmm. Aaron
and
wakes.
wake up and moi F devil
Uh-huh.
G
That's a gets.
this out of bed
Uh-huh.
C moi
Walks.
walk to the bedroom.
Back. Uh-huh.
She to go
Goes.
to the dig.
And you got it. Perfect. Keep going. You're doing great.
She
That's turns.
to the
Hot.
wall.
That's right.
She to
Turns.
the door
Uh-huh.
wall.
That's right.
She the
Uh-huh.
wall
Wash.
door.
You got it.
She
Starts with a P.
put
Mm-hmm. Puts.
the washing door and the wall.
You got it.
She went
Uh-huh.
up the wall door.
Uh-huh.
She did walk
Washes
you down
her
face
face.
with the wall door.
And you got it.
The she
Starts
down
with a T.
to
Turns.
off the wall.
Any questions? It's great.
So while we're trading readers, the point is how familiar the information is. This is something you do on a daily basis. This is not John Grisham's latest novel, thriller kind of thing. It's familiar information.
Jim, would you like to participate?
Sure.
Jim Prokoff, ladies and gentlemen. Jim and I began many years ago, right at the very beginning, with what Chris was just reading, Lawbuck stuff. He went through all 3 books of Lawbuck, Charlotte's Web, The Hobbit, and then when I pushed for going to The Lord of the Rings, because that's my favorite, and it just is part of the sequence, he went, no, we're going to read cowboy novels. So I don't know if he's seen this before or not. This is Shane. Okay, ready?
Shane by Jack
Schaefer.
Schaefer. He rode into our valley in the summer of 89.
89, yeah.
I was a kid. Then
Barely.
Burley on
Topping.
topping the backboard of Father's old
Chuck.
wagon.
Mm-hmm.
Truck wagon. I was on the upper rail of our small
Small.
Corral.
Corral. Mm-hmm. Soaking.
Soaking in the late afternoon sun. When I saw him far down the road where it swung into the valley from the open land
Good guess.
beyond in that clear, warming,
It's a state out west.
Wyoming
Wyoming.
air. I could see him plainly through though he was still several miles away. There seemed nothing
Look at the first two letters.
remarkable about him. Just another day.
With an R in there.
Stray horsemen riding up the road toward the cluster of frame buildings that was on our town. Then I saw a pair of cow hands loping past him.
All you do is just correct when needed. And what I've discovered is visual memory is so fantastic that with the repetition of words, if an individual misses a particular word, by the second or third time they see it, they've got it. And to watch this accumulation of vocabulary as it happens. And if you're reading really rich, expectant, anticipated text, for instance, if I give you the sentence, yesterday I drove my car down the... Right, you're going to come up with a word that is anticipated. And yesterday I went to the post office to drop off some mail. Yeah, you're all psychic. How amazing! And when you're reading things that have this flow and you're in it, you're going to be picking up all the words because they just make absolute sense within the context of what is anticipated. And even if it's trite, it's marvelous. Thank you, sir. You can go back and sit down. Oh, please, yes.
As Jimmy's mother, I have to tell you all that when Jimmy was just 5 years old, they told me he would never read when he was in kindergarten. And I pushed and pushed and pushed. Well, he ended up graduating at the age of 22 with a first, second grade level, not even. And I forced the county to find, so I just knew he wanted it. Like you were saying, you could tell. And when Tom came into Jimmy's life, it was like a miracle. Really, it changed his whole world. He writes notes now, Tom, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He reads all the time. He reads the Bible.
Yep.
So I just kept to tell you, I am so behind this whole
Yeah.
program.
Literacy is literally handing the individuals a master key to whatever they want to open for the rest of their lives.
And he
it
never read
stops.
that before.
No. This gentleman here, Simon Oakley, I've known since, what was the date I met you?
back in 2001,
What the?
Right.
September 8th, a couple days before the September 11th attacks.
Yes.
Oh, really?
I don't remember that, Simon does. And when I began with Simon, I began with the Lawbuck materials, and it wasn't working, it wasn't working, it wasn't working. But just after I was done with my hourly session, Simon would grab his favorite videos, run to the TV, plug them in, and watch his movies. And finally, it dawned on me, wait a minute. So I went to his mom, Cindy, I said, hey, what's his favorite movies? He goes, the Home Alone series. I went, okay. So I wrote to Fox Entertainment in California, explained who I was, what I was doing. Can I have your scripts? Which he had memorized after one viewing and watched daily. And so they, after my signing my life away, because of course they would kill me if I sold or played with their protected scripts, they sent me the Home Alone scripts. And Simon and I read those because he already had them memorized. Except for he didn't have the stage setting stuff, and we'd struggle through that. And we went through all 3 Home Alone stuff, and then we read Charlotte's Web, which was also a movie that he had memorized and saw. Halfway through Charlotte's Web, all of a sudden, all the lights went on, and he understood what literacy was. And it just exploded from there. So anyway, this is Treasure Island. Has he ever read Treasure Island?
No, he hasn't.
Nice and loud.
Treasure Island, Part 1, the old buccaneer, the old sea dog at the Admiral Benbow, Squire Trelawney, Dr. Livesey, and the rest of these gentlemen having asked me to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island from the beginning to the end, keeping nothing back but the bearings of the island, and that only because there is treasure not yet lifted, I take up my pen in the year of grace 1732 and go back to the time when my father kept the Admiral Benbow Inn, and the brown old seaman with the saber cut first took up his lodging under our roof. I remember him as if it were yesterday, as he came plodding to the inn door, his sea chest following behind him in a hand barrel, a tall, strong, heavy nut brown man, his tarry pigtail falling over the shoulder of his soiled blue coat, his hands ragged and scarred, with black broken nails and the saber cut across one cheek, a dirty livid white. I remember him looking round the cover and whistling to himself as he did so, and then breaking out in that old sea song that he sang so often afterwards, 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum.
By the way, I asked a whole bunch of my former students to come here, and some of them had other appointments and so on, but one of my favorites, Lynn Johnson from Lakewood, she began at the age of 35 with the whole process, right at the very beginnings, because she'd never learned how to read in school, and she'd gone until the age of 22. And she actually began at the beginnings. When I finished with her 9 years later, she was reading To Kill a Mockingbird. blew me away. I thought, well, she's going to hit that ceiling and that's as far as she's going to go. No. But I asked her a couple of weeks ago, could she come here today? She looked at me like I was nuts. She said, I have a job in Medina. I'm working on a farm. I get paid. You're not going to pay me. I'm not going to show people how to do it. And I went, yes, you have a job working in the community? That's fantastic. And that's more important, more real to her than coming to this. Even though she would perfectly be willing to share with you on her free time when she's not getting paid how skilled she is. That's wow.
So it's time for us to wrap up. I think you're going to get the idea of everything that we've said is still here. Tom has materials, giveaways. He's got flash drives if you're interested in that. But if you don't get one, then just contact him at his email or emails on the front.
Anybody here who hasn't signed in? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and sign in, or emails on the front slide, the first slide.
I have flash drives here. If you have a tablet or a computer that can download all the stuff, you can do it now. If not, I can mail you one, or I can email you all of the materials. I figured out actually how to do that in sections because some of the materials are so huge. And thank you, Neil, for coming. This gentleman started this process. You are the best guy.
And I'll collect your evaluations.
I'm giving
Any
you
questions? Any questions?
questions and also a commercial for my project on autism, if you're interested in looking. So if you have questions, stop and talk with us now. We do want to let you all go to lunch, but come on up if there's anything you want to say.
It's the entire work in history. It's more. It's the entire curriculum.
Okay, on the phone.